No, 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 no. We're live. 7:12. One more than 7:11. Then I would have had to get Slurpee. But hopefully everyone's doing good tonight. Tonight we're going to talk about the video that I just posted today, which is good. It is actually several cool things. One, big block, always good. Boosted big block, and not just one, but two different superchargers, twice as good. And then this one was actually, I look back and I think, I'm pretty sure that this was my very first big block Chevy build, my first official big block Chevy build. I think I'd done other things to other motors with, putting heads on or nitrous or, whatever those things. But I think that this is the first one that I put together and figured out all the things I wanted to put on it. And in this case, it wasn't just a dyno mule. It actually went into our 1977 Chevy crew cab dually to drive around like that, and even went and drove around like that with the blower, which was also kind of cool to have a because when you're at a race or whatever, and you can pop the hood and people are talking about all the cool things. And I remember being at one of the races and one of the guys with a turbo diesel complaining, "Oh yeah, I only got 14 or 15 miles per gallon on the way out here." I'm like, "Really? You're towing his race trailer?" I'm like, "Really? You're going to complain about that? This thing got like 5 or 6." I'm like, you know how many because we had dual 20-gallon tanks, I think, and that thing. I said, you know how many fuel stops that is from Southern California to Moseport, Canada? It was a lot. It did suck a lot of fuel. Luckily, back then, at least fuel was a little bit less expensive. But still. And then having the nice thing, though, I remember, because we made a couple of trips with the motor just naturally aspirated the way that it was. And it also had, so people know, it didn't have an overdrive transmission. So it had a turbo 400 and some sort of probably a 4 series gear, I'm thinking, in the rear end. And it was a dually and heavy and overloaded with a bunch of engines in the back, spare engines. And by spare engines, I mean junkyard motors that weren't even really tied down. They were just rattling around in the back of the truck. And then the 21-foot triple axle race trailer with a World Challenge Mustang, and all the things that you need to go, well, some of the things that you need to actually go racing. And so we were pulling it with that, and this was just a used truck that we bought to go racing. And not a perfect one, because the motor was not sound, not 100% sound. It was more like 70 to 80% sound. But we drove it around like that for quite a while. We put the supercharger on it. I remember I got a supercharger from the guys at Wyan. I think it was a Wyan supercharger. And we did some stories on it, I think, if I remember right. And then I ended up putting it on the truck because we needed more power. This thing didn't have enough power to go up hills and stuff. And we're like, we're going all the way across the United States. We need something. So we put the blower on, and that worked well. And the thing that I liked is that it didn't seem to tremendously change the fuel mileage while we were towing, which, like I said, was definitely single-digit mileage. So the guy that was at the race that was complaining about his 15 mile per gallon diesel towing his thing, I'm like, you don't even get to come over and talk to us. That's ridiculous. Plus, he had a really nice rig and a nice race car and all that stuff. So he didn't really get to talk to us. But the cool thing is that, and once I decided, okay, look, this thing is tired. We'd also, by the way, blown up the transmission too. The turbo 400 overheated to the point that we were driving it. It overheated so bad that we would take cups of water and we would throw it at the where the transmission cooler was on the radiator, and it would just flash. That's how hot it was. It was, you couldn't touch it or even be near it. It was terrible. So what we had to do was we had to drive home in first gear in that truck on the freeway from Barstow, I think, from the Barstow area, from a little bit on the 40 freeway to the Arizona side of Barstow, through Barstow, and then all the way up into the rest of Southern California. Luckily, we were that close, and it didn't happen in somewhere in Tornado Alley or something coming back down from Canada. So it got us some of the way. And the other thing that happened is we had to have a drive shaft made on the way, because the drive shaft, the U-joint broke and the drive shaft fell out. And, it it's always an adventure, and that was part of it. But so we built this motor. I decided, okay, look, what we want, obviously, since we're towing, is this thing never saw any kind of RPM. I know that it never saw 5,000. I don't think it ever saw 4,500 or something, even like on a downshift to go up a hill or whatever. So where we wanted, definitely 4,500 or 5,000 and below is all that we cared about. So with that in mind, I decided to put together this combination and make lots of torque. So we picked a really small manifold in the Performer 2.0, a really small camshaft, a 203, 212 or something, sub 500 lift kind of thing. And then the heads were not bad, actually. The Joel from Competition Heads, I think was the name of his place, worked up I got a set of 049s. I think I got those from the guys at FOF, if I remember right. He milled them a little bit. They put bigger valves in them, did some porting on them, and we used those on this application. And, those heads are, this thing only made 435 or 6 or whatever horsepower. So these heads, even in stock form, even a peanut port set of heads was enough to support what we were doing. But these heads work well on this. We put a piston in it. We put a dome piston in it to bring the compression up. So it was somewhere between 9.5 and 10 to 1. And all of that worked out pretty good. So the thing drove well, and then as you saw in the video, if you guys haven't seen it, we ran the thing naturally aspirated after we went through the break-in, because this had a flat tapping camshaft in it, so we had to break all that stuff in, and then we made power pulls and did the timing and air fuel the way that you always do, and then we ran it with the 174 blower, and then we ran it with the bigger, I think it was a 420 blower. My 250 kind of stands out in my mind too, but it's one of those. I think it was the 420 though. It's a cool looking blower. It's in the thumbnail, and maybe we'll take a look at that and see. Yeah, so this one. So it had this supercharger on it. That was the second one. The other one was the smaller 174. Dual Holly blower carbs, which worked perfect right out of the box. And we tried this blower, and it worked out well. And we didn't have it, pulleyed up by any stretch of the imagination. This thing with the 174 made, it only made 5 pounds. And even with this bigger blower, it only made 6.5 pounds. So we weren't spinning the heck out of it, and it worked, fairly well. We ran the motor NA with a 750 Holly, and then put a 950 on it with the blower, because the blower is going to want more. If we made 580 horsepower with the small blower, so if you had a 580 horsepower motor, you'd have a good sized carburetor on it. So we ran the 950 on it, so it wouldn't be restrictive, and then we ran 2 750s on the bigger blower, and it worked out good. It was a fun exercise, and I actually got to drive the truck around with the little blower and this new motor. We didn't ever tow the race trailer with it anymore, unfortunately, because by the time all this happened, it was the racing season for me was already done, and I didn't go back and run World Challenge again. So that was done. But I did get to drive the truck around by itself with that motor and the blower on it, with the small blower on it, and it was a lot of fun. Because now it would spin the tires and chirp the gears and stuff, and it was kind of a fun deal. So we'll get a poll going here. So since this was my first big block build, have you ever built a big block Chevy? Very simple. Very simple. No. I was just watching SWAT. So see what you guys have got going on. The squirrel, the photo that I took was not a picture of my truck. My truck was repainted by somebody. It was all blue. It was dark blue. So it was not that one. That was just one that I pirated off of the internet somewhere. Even if there's a way to make more power, the sound and attention you get from a nice hot big block always has a special place in my heart. Yeah, it was cool to lift the hood, and because when you're standing around with all the race guys, you're like, hey, look, yeah, we got a supercharged big block on ours. They're like, really? You drove that thing all the way across the country? Yeah, because we're that dumb. So stroking a factory big block Chevy, the factory blocks will go to 496 inches. And in fact, in part 2 of this video that I just posted, that's where we take this motor, is 496. Richard, you should test 4V modular heads on a 5.4 block. I've run 5.4 4-valve motors already, and those videos are already up. My blown 468 and a G-body got 3 miles per gallon. So I guess you win. Oh, test the different heads on them. I'm not really interested in testing all those stock heads. I don't think that that's a question that anybody cares about anymore, about which one of those stock heads is the best one. Which style of supercharger has the most potential to make the most horsepower? Well, for superchargers, the biggest one would have the potential to make the most horsepower. But a root supercharger is not really in the running unless it's a whole lot bigger than everything else. Twin screws can make a lot of power, again, depending on size. And a centrifugal, they have centrifugals that can make a lot of power. Again, that's a size thing. Yeah, the 420 was good. And it looked right on the big block. Actually, it made it look a whole bunch more like a boat motor than anything else. All it needed was the upswept, boat headers. .420 blower is from B&M. Yeah, I think it did say B&M on it. Ivan, you're enjoying a cigar, so the roots blower is appropriate. Big blocks are my main deal. Nice. I helped my dad build a 632 big block. That's cool. So that's is that a tall deck block then? Played with lots of big blocks, but never a Chevy. What supercharger would be good on a 351? You would pick the supercharger just like you pick a turbo based on whatever kind of power output that you want. So there are lots of superchargers that are available for a 351. You just have to decide, first of all, how much power you want. That's going to narrow this down to certain range of superchargers. And then you have to decide what kind of power curve you want. Do you want a roots blower? Do you want a centrifugal blower? Do you want a twin screw if this is an EFI thing? The nitro class is a big block Chevy always goes boom. Never built a big block Chevy with a handle like 572 Chevy big block. You're saying you've never built a big block? I've built many small block 350s and 400s. Also built 455 Olds. The gas station one. It is expensive. Use the Skyram with the GT45 turbo. Never even built the V8. Then what motors have you put together then? A diesel truck, 563 C60 grain trucks. They'd only get 1.5 miles per gallon when they're loaded out of a diesel. Building a Dart Base 622 big block, mild bracket motor, small head, small cam, guessing 1100. Cool. 572s are fairly expensive for the amount of power you get out of a turnkey motor. Yeah, crate motors are not a cheap date, but they're all done and ready to go. So they're ready to put on the dyno, which is nice. Is it true the superchargers will kill fuel economy for a daily? No. It's true that a supercharger for most people will hurt your average fuel economy only because you're using the supercharger a lot. And when you're using the supercharger a lot, you're going to be using more fuel. So that definitely happens. But under cruise, and especially on a modern fuel injected car, on a supercharger that has a bypass valve, the supercharger doesn't use a whole bunch of extra fuel. Richard, 5.4 head testing maybe showed that putting 4V heads on a 2V or a 3V 5.4 will do. Again, that's just not that. I don't know. I think that the number of people, I mean, you would be the one that would be interested in that. I don't know who else would be interested in that, because I don't understand why putting 5.4 4-valve heads on a 2V or a 3V 5.4, how is that any different than just having a navigator motor? Grand National LC2V6, but that's a good one, though. Any plans in the near future for an AMC? I don't have any AMCs and have never even seen any on the wrecking yard. Building a 519 for 71 Monte Carlo, possibly a Pro Charger later down the road. So do you have a like a 502 block then? You have a bigger bore block? My dream car is a 70.5 split bumper Camaro. I'm right there with you. My first car, 572 big block and a roots blower. Built a few stock Hemis, but no big blocks yet. We'll be getting into my 5th gen. So how's our poll doing? 63% saying not very many yeses on the big blocks. Wow. Oh, I just ended the poll. I wasn't trying to do that. I clicked on it by accident. All the farmer stuff is gas, refuse to switch to diesel. Oh, okay. Maybe that's why the fuel mileage is so low. That's I was surprised. A diesel should do better than that, and they would. So maybe we need to have another poll. So no, I wasn't trying to do that. I don't care about that. Why are you doing that? There we go. So next poll, have you ever run a supercharger on any motor? Let's see if what we're doing is different. Gen 6 502 block and crank, good. This is double pull on pull action. Jeff, what's up? Tuned in specifically for the big block chat. Big block stuff is good. There's nothing wrong with that. This one was cool too, because I like running them and I like doing all the stuff and testing on them. And one thing I didn't put in here that only the live feed guys will get to know about, unless I do another video on it some other time. But during this test, while we were running these blowers, and after I put this motor on, I had a set of Holley aluminum heads that they made back in the day. I don't know who, somebody may have done them for Holley, but whoever did them, I tried a set of Holley aluminum heads in place of these ported oval port heads, and they actually made less power than the oval ports did. So I took them back off. We put the oval ports back on to get back to where the power was. And I did that. I don't think I did that. I didn't do that test naturally aspirated. I did it with the blower. And we tried doing timing sweeps and doing all that because I thought there's no way that this could make less power. But it did. And so we took that and I thought, well, maybe something happened to the motor. So we took them off and put the oval port heads back on and power was back to where it was. So there's a little behind the scenes for you. Done big block Fords, but not big block Chevys. That still counts as a big block. Run a Paxton on a 5-liter. Yep, run lots of those. Run a Magnuson on a Hemi. An old drag racing guy from the 60s. He told me racing was fun until he went to blowers. Just built my twin turbo blown 396 sixes. Still yet to fire. George, I had a Corvair Spider Turbo. Broke the trans a couple of times. That's very cool. That's very other guys. My best friend had a V8 Pro Street Vega. Those are cool. 388 small block for it. Ended up with an 871 to 660 center squirters, which is what you should have. I'm assuming that they were center squirters. We're going to Vortec on a 350. Yep, that's a good combination. Just bought a 671 kit. I like that. Smog pump compressing a lawnmower engine. Did you do that? Because I wanted to do that for a long time. It's always so disappointing when the magic parts let you down. Yeah. For me, it's not. And I had somebody made a comment about this on one of Matt's from Sloppy's posts about this too. He said, "Oh, you hate these intakes," and I'm like, "There's some specific intake manifold." I'm like, "No, I don't hate anything. I don't hate any of these parts. My job is the way that I see it, my own job description, is to go on the dyno and test things and see what happens and then report that. So I don't have, I'm not trying to prove that one thing is better than the other. I don't care about that. It's just an A and a B thing. That doesn't matter to me. I think because, what the heck was it? Oh, I know. It was a short runner intake manifold. It was one of those sheet metal fabricated things, like a Sniper deal, or lots of people offer those. So Richard hates these because they lose so much torque. I'm like, actually, no, I don't hate those. The fact that I tell you that I show you the dyno graph where they lose lots of torque, that's just me showing you what they do. I don't determine that they do that. They just do that. So if you're looking for an application, and I think I even put this in the comment, I said, look, if you're looking for an application like my stock truck that never sees above 5,500 RPM in the 3 or 4 times that I've ever even let it go there, I said, that would be a terrible intake manifold because it's just going to lose torque everywhere compared to what's there. I said, but because Matt wanted an intake manifold that it would help him run more engine speed and that fit under the hood that he's running boost on, I said, that's actually a perfect application for that. He wants to run to 7,500 or 8,000 RPM or whatever. I said, that's where that thing is going to be better. It's going to shine doing that. He's got enough stall converter. He's got a turbo. He's got lack of traction. He's got all the things that are going to make it work for a short runner manifold. I said, so that's a really good application for it. One is not, and one is. And you know how we find that out? By testing. Only found one 455 Olds in the junkyard. I've never seen an Olds. 401s or whatever the Trans Am, that's what the Trans Am motor is, right? I've seen those in the wrecking yards. I've seen 1 or 2 of those. Richard, have you done any testing with turbocharging a blower motor? You've seen that many, many times here. The Corvair Corsa has 140. I'm not a huge fan of the 180 horsepower turbo motors. Why are you not a fan of the turbo version? Built a 454 Gen 5, couple of 350, stroke with 305. Cool, and a 401 Buick. Going to be helping with first start on a Kenny Ball 60s F100. That'll be cool. Turbocharger versus supercharger. Why pick a supercharger over a turbo? There are lots of reasons that people want a supercharger. Some just want like the way that it looks. Some like the supercharger in the V of the motor of a V8 motor, the way that God and nature intended it. They like the immediate boost response. They like the noise. They like that it's all polished and chromy and it sticks out of the hood. Immediate torque, that kind of thing. The turbocharger at any given boost level will make more power than a supercharger does. So if you're looking at it from an efficiency standpoint, the turbo ultimately makes more power. But it doesn't have the same kind of response. It has lots of plumbing. It adds exhaust heat and stuff. And so there are all kinds of things that people could bicker back, and they do, believe me, they do, would bicker back and forth about which one of those is best. But there is no best. It's a subjective thing. You get to choose that. And it's cool that we have those choices, that we could pick all kinds of stuff. 471 on 2V Cleveland using a modified dual plane intake manifold. How much power will a 471 support? Like 500 horsepower or something? For this 502, I have a set of early 2000s Victor Jr. CNC rec port heads that Chapman did. I remember those. And a cool 80s Edelbrock dual plane Dominator C454. They had a dual plane with a Dominator on it? Twin charging is a pain. Yeah, I just did it because we had in those instances, we had two factory supercharged motors. So, it's already there. Why don't you put a turbo on it? We also had great luck with the 049s. Yeah, they're good heads. Have you looked at the YN Stealth for towing? Yeah, the dual plane manifold. We've run the YN Stealth a lot at West Tech. What piston ring material is good for a budget build? 300 to 400 horsepower turbo small block Ford. I run 781s on my big block. Oh, for the cylinder heads? 403, that's what I was thinking of for the Trans Am. First non-stock engine build was a 408. Last of the V8 Interceptors, that's right. 421 small block Chevy blow through F3R. So that's a real build then. And F3R has a lot of potential. Alan, so my experience with 180 horsepower turbo Corvair engines is that they don't make 180 very often. I'm assuming, being air cooled, that they heat up and don't make the power. The valve seats fall out. That's common on VW engines, the air cooled VW stuff also, especially the buses. The heads get hot. Yep, and the carburetors are not good too. Cool. Supercharging or turbocharging for low end torque. They both can be made to do that. This depends on how you size it. Mike, always wanted a blower, but now I'm got the turbo itch. Wanted to do my first turbo build on a 351 Windsor Ranchero. That would be cool. Now I'm thinking a 1.3 liter EFI Festiva, also cool. The only thing I'm worried about on the Festiva is you can do an FMU for fuel, and that works for low boost stuff. I don't know about timing control on that. C454 Edelbrock intake was for a Dominator. That's cool. I can see a twin turbo top fuel car. Yeah, they outlawed that. The thing is that they don't have. I don't think that they're lacking power with top fuel. They're lacking traction probably. Headers versus manifolds for towing. A header will make more torque and more low speed torque. Richard, have you ever seen main cap damage kill a motor? If you damage the main cap, it's because you've killed the motor normally. So I don't know how a damaged main cap would kill the motor unless it's pinching the bearing or something. Is that what you're talking about? Richard, have you run a test with bigger carbs on a big block Chevy with an 871 on a mild combo? And when I say bigger carbs, I'm saying 1050s. So you want a comparison between two 1050s and two 750s or something like that on a mild big block. Is that what you're saying? You're not going to see anything. You need to have the airflow need before and then you supply the airflow, and then it will make more power. But we normally run two 750s, but they also have two 950s that you can run, and that can feed a lot of stuff unless you're really trying to twist the 871 all the way. I meant adding a turbo onto a blown engine, turbo feeding a blower, twin charge setup. Yeah, I have 2 videos up on that already. We did it on the 3800, and I did it on the 03 Cobra motor with the guys from HP Performance. So turbos feeding the Roots blower. Force induction on newer engines reduce long-term reliability. I think it probably would. I don't know how much, and I don't think it would hurt it as much as it's going to be a function of how much you use it. Are you beating on it all the time like that? Top Fuel would have a hard time spooling the turbos they would need. So, Justin, you want to build a 540 with a 1071 for a flat bottom boat? That should be a fun ride. The Honda 90 is doing good. I haven't. I need to take a few hours and spend some time with it so that I want to tune it up. I want to check the points on it and check the lash on it. Did Mahovitz crack the mains open on one of his motors? I don't know, but was your question about the mains didn't hurt the motor? It was maybe the other way around. Is that what you're asking? Always wanted a draw through turbo. I'm going to do a test on one of those. Jason, Gen 6 454 with 781 heads will easily stand up to 7 or 10 pounds of boost. We've run way more than that on, if you look at the Boneyard boost deal, it will do way more than that. And the ring gap should be 6.5 thousandths per inch of bore. Got a Buick 3.8 supercharged. It feels like a small block Chevy. It's 20 miles per gallon. Took it on a 500-mile road trip. Got 30 miles per gallon on the freeway. Yeah, that has a bypass valve and stuff, and the factory ECU and all that, and it works pretty good. El Camino, yeah, if you want to put those 1050s on there, the drive, it's going to be pretty responsive with two 1050s on it. It's going to be hard to get the low speed response from being anything but ultra snappy. How hard is to weld fuel injection bungs on aluminum dual plane? It's not hard at all. I mean, if you know how to weld aluminum, that's an easy deal for you to do. What do you think about the TVS 3100? I've never even seen one. According to Scotty Gilmer, turbos are definite engine failure adders. He's not the guy I would be getting mechanical advice from. Have you used an ATM 650 carburetor? I don't know what an ATM 650 carburetor is. Does it hurt an engine for the header diameter to be slightly smaller than the exhaust port on the head? You're probably going to wear away that edge of the header over time, but I've never seen that. Usually the header is bigger than the exhaust port. I always wanted to convert my Firebird 3800 V6 to the supercharger setup. Yeah, that's the bell housing that we use when we run the 3800 on the engine dial. Richard, learn a lesson today. Make sure you use fuel lines that are rigid with mechanical fuel pumps. You mean on the draw through on the inlet side? ATM is a carburetor company owned by the people who owned Quick Fuel. Oh, did they start a new one or something? I've watched a lot of your videos, but I haven't seen anything on Gen 3 Hemis. There's lots of Hemi videos up. There's a whole bunch of them. I wrote a book on Hemis. So I speak Hemi. What supercharger would you run on the small block Chevy stockish? Again, it just depends on what you want to do. All of the centrifugal guys make kits for them. Vortec and Paxton and Torque Storm all make blow-through stuff for those. Mark, what's up? I just checked in, hoping you were live, hoping someone has some insight on valves, setting valve procedure on a 350 with hydraulic roller while the motor's running. The way that I do that is the same way that I do it with flat tappet cams. While it's running, it gets messy because oil is going to go everywhere if you have the valve cover off. But while it's running, you can back off the, I'm sure it has does it have an adjustable valve train? What year is this and all that? If it has an adjustable valve train, you back off the rocker until you hear it clack, and then you tighten it down until it doesn't clack, and then you add another half turn. And you do that in line for each one of them. I'm going to do a draw through on a 63. Oh, F48, all aluminum V8. Nice. 215. Big Bang Hemi was clear just how much power can be had. They have really good cylinder heads and stuff. I've never made 600 horsepower from a 5.7 Hemi, not with bolt-on stuff. Yeah, why would you just valve start running? I've done that before, and I remember doing that with my stepdad, and he had the little clips that you put over the oil holes in the rockers so that I remember revving the motor with one of the rockers off, and it just shot oil over the fender and stuff. But if you have the little clips to make the oil go down into the rocker, you can if the thing is idling at like 6 or 7 or 100 RPM or whatever, you can go in and do it that way. Otherwise, it's just as easy to, especially after the thing has already started, the lifters are pumped up. Then you could just go in and put it on the heel of the cam and just check turn the push rod, tell you to have push rod drag till it's got contact, and then put a half turn in it. If it's a quarter turn or half turn or 3/4 of a turn, none of that's going to make a difference. It's going to run exactly the same. You started out with 550 to 600 horsepower, 454 with a 1471 blower, still make the same power percentage increase? No, it won't. The supercharger has a fixed amount of power that it will support. What will happen is the boost pressure will go down, and so the power could come up a little bit, but you might make a little bit more power if you're spinning the blower at the same speed, but ultimately you're going to get to some point where the blower doesn't flow anymore. So it doesn't just keep adding 150 horsepower or whatever the gain was. It just doesn't keep adding that no matter where you start from. Because if you started with 1,000 horsepower and a combination and put the blower on there, what you'd get is vacuum. Richard, what supercharger would you use on a 454 to be used in a towing situation? I use the 174 blower on ours. Half turn after no noise. Yep. 72,350. That's what it'd be. Do you have the flat tappet or the stamp steel rockers on it? Oh, this link bar. Oh, okay. That's a whole different kind of setup. Unknown rocker ratio. That's okay. I have a custom topless set of valve covers. I've seen those too. I've seen them where the center section is removable. That makes it a little bit easier. How's our poll doing? Our second poll. Have you ever run a supercharger on any motor? 60% saying no, 40% saying yes. So that's a little bit higher than the big block answer. Let's see. Dodge results. Where's my turbo stuff? Hemi turbos. Hemi turbo, Hemi turbo, Hemi turbo. Carcraft twin turbo. That's not it. If it's a proper gap for boost on a big block, would it be okay to run NA for a while in the same gap? Yes, the motor's not going to care. And the gap is 6.5 thousandths per inch of bore. John and Richard, I bring up the solid fuel lines on the draw side. Had a quadrijet turned right, still bogged. And my other truck, the bowls wouldn't refill. We see that, we see that sometimes on the engine dyno with the radiator hoses, the hose going in. This is more common on the Ford stuff where we have to make a turn to go into it. And if you don't have a spring, the wound spring in that stops the thing from collapsing, when the pump gets going, especially if you have a mechanical pump that changes with the engine speed. On the electric pump, it's always going, but with the mechanical pump, when you wick it up and it really gets going, it draws and it will suck the hose close. It'll just pinch it all the way close. You're like, that's probably not very much water flow like that. Can you do a video on how to build a turbo kit for 454? That video, I think, is already up. We did throw together a turbo setup for a 454. Ernie from when he worked at West Tech, just welded together basically a Y pipe off of the stock exhaust manifolds. And it's not hard to do at all. And now people make them. You just need to get shorty headers for it. Ram's horns headers work. I say we, Jason from JT Fab, made some forward facing headers for our turbo setup, but you have to make them so that the kit that you would put in a vehicle has to be planned out so that you're able to get the Y pipe and the turbo position and all that stuff around everything else that is in the way. So it has to get past the under or above or whatever, the water pump and the accessories and the air conditioning or power steering or whatever things you have there. Is the battery in the way? All that stuff. So it just becomes a fitting everything in this available space. Ryan, you're swapping a 351 Windsor, swapping out the numbers matching in a 61 Mach 1. Congratulations. That's an awesome car. Then you're putting in a 7.3 Godzilla motor. Okay. That will be cool. That way you can put the numbers matching motor to the side and still have that. No, Ryan, it's a good idea. Mark, you can convert a vacuum secondary to a mechanical. We do it all the time. We just do it with a simple zip tie, so that when we open it up, we just both throttle blades open up. Dylan will be doing a first gen SRT Grand Cherokee 6.1 cam twin screw, 8 to 10 pounds, 600 wheel horsepower at 10 pounds. Seems like a lot to me, especially on pump gas. How to differentiate between a 460 and a 429? The easy way is to look at the VIN number and look at the year of the vehicle, because they came in different year vehicles. Torn, if I should keep my Monte Carlo or turbo or do both, even though twin charge is not efficient compared to the turbo alone, twin charge has a visual appeal. It is. Again, you got to do what speaks to you. Forget about what everybody else says. What would be a good cam? 268 extreme energy or something like that on 383. KD, you got 10 cars to pick up? My plan is to one day do an offset stroker and overboard for V6 Pentastar. Yeah, Ryan, don't cut up that Mach 1. I wouldn't do that to put that engine in it if that's required. Do you still have access to the 400M? No, that was more than a decade ago. We're doing something similar with my dad's Z28, the Z302, to take that motor and put it to the side. Building a flat top 377, 400 with a 350 crank. Is it a stock 400 block, like a GM block, or is it an aftermarket block that will look stock? That'll be cool. Is it going to have the cross ram on it? I don't think I've ever driven a roots blower, twin screw blower, and centrifugal supercharger. Just about ready to dyno my 3900 bore rec port head LS combo. That'll be cool. 400 block. Okay. So what heads are you going to use on that? Are you going to use the Trick Flow aluminum fuely heads on it? Just to keep it semi-period correct. And 377 is kind of in the vein of the DZ302. I'd like to think that it's the big brother of the 302. 61% are on the nose. We don't have a cross ram, but I'd be interested in a copy. And yes, I want to use a Trick Flow fuely heads. Yep. 3/4 race cam. That's right. At least. Yeah, Jeff, you're not putting a Dunt-off cam in it, right? You're putting a different camshaft in it. Yeah, it'll be rev happy. Well, whatever heads and cam and intake manifold you put in there will dictate how rev happy it is. Ryan Mark is saying put a roller 351 that you can get from the wrecking yard, and instead of the Godzilla motor if it won't fit. And that's a good option because they're cheap. If you have a 700 horsepower and a 500-inch engine and a 671 making 7 to 10 pounds, how much will you pick up? A 671, a really good one, like a race blower from the guys at the blower shop, can support about 1,000 horsepower. So 10 pounds. You're going to be up near maxing the blower out. Now that you did the L78, any plans on building an L88 clone? No, the guys at Westech already ran a they ran an L88 there recently, and they also ran, I think they ran an L88, and they also ran an LS7 crate motor that a guy had been sitting for decades. It was still in the box, and they ran one of those, I think, if I remember right. I was thinking about an L88, but finding the heads are really, really expensive. Richard, do you have any experience with Chinese 1.5 and 1.6 rockers? I've tried some of the I've run Scorpion stuff, and I've run some Speedmaster stuff. I don't really trust those for something that I would be running for a long time on the street, especially for something that I would be driving across the country. But I've run some on the engine. I know that they worked. You think that the Calypso green Fox bodies are rare? You can look that up and see how many that they made. But when you start getting into this car and this interior and this paint, and it's a convertible, but it had this top and a leather interior, we start getting into all the list of the things that make the car rare. It just becomes not that valuable. Fox cars are becoming valuable, but I don't know that one's going to be any more so. Ryan, you want to get you're asking if you're going to get 600 horsepower from the, I don't know what that crate motor is. What's a good turbo that won't break the bank for a stock bar 454 with big dome pistons? pick the turbo based on the power that you want. So an S475 is a pretty cheap turbo, and that's like 1,000 horsepower turbo. Jeff, the 400 block and a 283 crank is not the reason that any motor would run to 8,500. The crank has nothing to do with that. It has almost nothing to do with that. That is all valve train. So we are at 40% saying yes, that they've run superchargers. I should have asked if you'd run turbos, right? Two sets of Scorpion rockers. First set failed because of my stupidity. That's good. Taking the blame. I like that. Taking responsibility. Second says holding after 6 years. Well, that's good then. One thing when you put rockers on, make sure you like dip them in oil. It's better to have for everything to have oil when it first starts up. Yeah, I think a lot of more fasting. I think you're right. I think a lot more people would have said, yes, I've had turbos on stuff. If you're going to try to get 600 horsepower from a 351, you're not going to get that from a stock bottom end. You're going to have to build the motor, and it'd be a lot easier if you did it out of a 408 rather than 351. Because if you do it with a 351 and you're trying to make 600 horsepower, first it's going to take some talent, and it's going to take some expensive parts, and it's also going to take a lot of RPM. So it's not going to be a good driver for that. How long is the stroke on a 6-liter? It's the same as a 5.3 and a 6.2. Is it 3.622, I think? A little off from the push rod geometry, yeah. When do we make the video about shifting points? That's on the list. The next one's going to be part 2 of the video that I did tonight. And we have 2 more minutes, so I'm going to close out our 61% no poll. I don't like all the negativity, man. Yeah, you can rev a 5.3 just as high as a 4.8 or a 6.0 in terms of RPM ability. Now getting them, each of those to make power is a different set of parameters that you'd want to do. A 6-liter is going to take, to make power at 6,000 or at 8,000 RPM, if you wanted to make peak power there, is going to take a shorter runner intake that flows more head flow, more camshaft than a 5.3 or a 4.8. Not because they like to rev, because they don't require as much of those things to get it to rev because it is a smaller motor. The 351 with the Edelbrock top end, that worked out good. That was like 450 or 460 or something like that. 500 wheel horsepower with your Mustang. Are you adding boost to that? Jonathan, you want to combine the poly stuff with the is all of the width and everything all the same on those? I know we get lots of votes, but no likes. I know, story of my life. Francisco, what's up? How come we can get 134 votes? Yeah, 5.7 rod or 6-inch rod. You're de-stroking it, right? So you gotta run the long rod. It's just gonna connect the piston. Building a twin turbo 496. Blow through carb for 1,000 horsepower. I think I would run two GT45s on that. I know they'll go 1,500, but they'll be pretty good at 1,000 horsepower. I know the frogs are back. I was just telling Lisa, you know what? I haven't heard the frogs and people haven't mentioned them. So they've been quiet for a while, but now they're back. Have you seen Gen 5 heads on an LS block? Looks like it makes great power. BTR makes a cam for it. Yeah, but the problem is that I'll never do one of those, I don't think, because there's no reason to, because it's not just a head swap. You got to have a different head. You got to have a different cam. You have to have a different exhaust. You have to have a different intake manifold. You have to have different push rods. You have to have different, I mean, it's all Gen 5 stuff, basically. And so I don't know where the benefit of that is, because that stock head isn't better than other LS heads that you could get for the LS. Brian and I talked about that years ago on the 5.3. I'm like, yeah, Brian, we need to do that. We need to get as a, like the L83 head is a much better head than a stock 706 head. So that would be cool if it bolts on and goes. He goes, yeah, we definitely need to do that. But wait, the ports are not lined up anymore. No, they're not. So the camshaft's not lined up anymore. Wait, it has a different exhaust bolt pattern. Yes, it has a different intake bolt. It's a whole thing you got to change. Then you have to have two complete, like you have to have a Gen 4 and a Gen 5 to be able to make this hybrid. You should have just run one or the other. Will a $200 refurbished laptop run a Holley V3? Yes, that's what I have. I have a $300 a refurbished Tough Books or something. Dylan, on a 4.8, I like putting smaller cams on in there, but if you want something and you're going to put a converter in it, then maybe a Truck Norris cam with a converter, and you should definitely put springs in it. Has anyone ever tested throttle body EFI on a root style supercharger? It's a 468 rec port with a B&M 250. The Jeep Wrangler. The carb's not happy. It should work fine as long as it will spray the fuel in and repeat every time you're asking it to do that, which I've had problems with throttle bodies in the past. Not on a blower application, actually, only on some NA combinations. But that should work fine. It would be a better deal than a carburetor, especially if you're getting lots of angle for like a crawler or something. One more question. Oh, here we go. Would you get any charge cooling from a draw-through turbo? Yes, you do get a lot of cooling from a draw-through turbo, just like you do on a blow-through. It's just that you get the charge cooling later on the blow-through than you do on the draw-through. So if that makes sense. Scrolling. Richard, whose EFI are you having good luck with? I run Holley on everything, if that's your question. Rolling. A Holley HP, but only because that's what I know. I'm not saying that that's the best. I'm just saying that that's the one that I use when I do all the dyno testing. Does the charge losses some of its cooling effect, cooling the turbo itself? I don't know what you mean. You want it to, you actually want it to cool the charge air, and it does do that. In fact, it does it for a longer period of time as a draw through, but I don't think it's really good for the turbo. I think that that's a downside of a draw through. I just want to do it because I haven't done one. And I think it's kind of cool. It's kind of old school and people like that stuff. So I want to try it. And on that note, it is time to go. Thank you guys all for showing up. I got to go down and take care of the puppies. Puppies. Puppy.